This is the G-823 bird and magnetometer system. Consists of a bird cable, a G-823 electronics and sensor. Part of the system is already installed in the bird. When we open the case, we will find a packet of documentation, electronics, RS-232 data cable, and some power cable, and finally a DC data junction box with a mounting bracket to fit on the bottom of the helicopter. We're going to assemble some of these components together so that we can demonstrate the operation of the system. We're going to install the G-823 electronics into the cable harness. To begin with, we need to be careful connecting the sensor cable to the electronics. The sensor cable is fragile and requires special care. There are 4 small keys and 1 wide key on the connector. Align the keys with the mating connector on the chassis. Touch them together with minimum force, then turn the locking ring until the connector is seated. That's all that's required. You do not need to push on the connector at all to seat it. Now, we'll work together to install the electronics into the cable harness. We're going to start by removing the cap on the cable enclosure. The cap has a circular hole that you can see. There's a circular hole in the cap. The far end has an oval hole in the electronics is going to mount such that both connectors on the sensor connector end align with the oval hole. As we slide the electronics in, we observe the oval hole for connector alignment, and then we twist the equipment until the connectors are lined up. Once the connectors are lined up, we can mate the sensor connector, again aligning the keys to match the connector on the electronics chassis, and then turning the locking ring to mate the connector. The cap goes over the cable. Power and communications cable end. And then we mate the power communications cable just like we mated the sensor cable. To connect the power and data cable, similar to connecting the sensor cable, first align the keys, then turn the locking ring to let the locking ring do the work. Now the electronics is assembled into the cable, and we can start working on the rest of the system assembly. Now we're going to connect the bird cable to the helicopter and the DC data junction box. The DC data junction box we've seen when we opened up the G-823 case. This box is going to hang underneath the helicopter by hose clamps and these strong aluminum brackets. The bird cable is going to connect to the helicopter hook with this eyelet. That way, if there's ever a safety issue, the pilot can release the bird by opening the hook. There are 2 electrical cables that come from the bird. There's a DC power and data cable from the magnetometer, and there is a coaxial cable that comes from the GPS antenna mounted on the back of the bird. The GPS coax has an adapter barrel. This adapter barrel has been modified to reduce the amount of force required to part the cable should we need to release the bird. The DC data power cable has been modified to remove the locking ring for the same reason, such that if we need to release the bird will fall away with minimal force to disconnect the connector. To connect the DC data power cable to the box, just align the pins and push the connector home. To keep the connector from coming loose, we put a single wrap of electrician's tape around the connector, and that will require about 20 to 40 pounds of force to break the connector. We will do a similar thing when we connect the GPS connector to the cable that comes from the helicopter body. Again, the tape is to provide some 20 to 40 pounds of force requirement to break the connection. The RS-232 data cable comes from the body of the helicopter, connects to the DC data junction box, and then gets screwed in place. Again, this one is permanently installed because it does not break away. To power on the magnetometer, lift and flip the power switch. The indicator light should glow green. To turn off the magnetometer, lift and flip the power switch. The indicator light will turn off. The bird, nose, and tail are each held in place with 5 non-magnetic brass screws. These screws can be removed with a standard Phillips screwdriver. They should be replaced with parts supplied by Geometrics as we test these screws to make sure that they are non-magnetic before we ship them to a customer. Once the screws are removed, the nose or tail can be removed from the bird. It's best to have the bird standing vertical to remove the nose, as the nose is quite heavy, 40 pounds or approximately 18 kilograms. To remove the nose, hold the bird down, grasp the nose with both hands and lift it straight up, and then set it aside. The bird has several components that are put together to make the assembly. To begin, at the back of the bird is the tail section, which includes a GPS antenna. There is a coaxial cable connected to the GPS antenna. There's some weight in the tail, so you need to be careful of removing the tail with the 5 screws that hold the tail to the center tube. The center tube is mostly air inside. However, on the outside, at the middle of the center tube, is a bridle, which is the mechanical connection to the tow cable. And just inside the bridle is a sensor mount. You can see it outside where the 4 aluminum bolts are. Coming forward is the nose section, which is the heaviest part of the bird. Grasp the sensor and sensor orientation stand with your hand and twist or tilt the sensor to change orientation. Now the sensor is tilted with the top towards the front of the bird. The optional power distribution system includes a distribution box and various cables. We supply a power input cable that has a connector to fit the box, but bare wires on the end that connects to the helicopter, since we don't know which ship or which type ship that cable will connect to when delivered. The magnetometer cable is 28 volts, plugs to the magnetometer port. The altimeter cable is for 28 volts, connects to the altimeter port. The GPS cable is to supply 12 volts, plugs to a smaller connector on the GPS port. And there are also auxiliary connectors and a connector for a navigation system should the optional navigation system be provided.
Pricing and contact information can be found on our website at www.geometrics.com or simply call us at 408-954-0522.